Those medals are fake." My brother's voice rang through the courtroom with the confidence of a man who had never been told no. Every witness he had brought nodded immediately. "Absolutely fake. I've seen replicas just like them. Anyone can buy those online." A few people in the gallery murmured in agreement. Behind him, my parents smiled. Not nervous smiles, victorious smiles, the kind people wear when they think the ending has already been written. I stood alone at the defense table. No attorney, no witnesses, no dramatic speech. Just a black folder resting beneath my hand. My brother laughed. "Looks like even her lawyer figured out she was lying." The courtroom chuckled. Then I opened the folder. I removed a sealed packet and handed it to the bailiff. The judge broke the seal. At first his expression didn't change. Then he turned another page. And another. The room became strangely quiet. The judge slowly lifted his eyes toward my brother. For the first time all morning there was no amusement on his face. "Mr. Carter," he said carefully, "do you have any idea who your sister actually is?" My father's face immediately lost its color, and my brother's smile disappeared, because the answer was about to destroy everything they thought they knew about me. "My name is Rebecca Carter. I was 45 years old when my own family dragged me into court. By then I had spent 23 years serving my country. I had served in Iraq. I had served in Afghanistan. I had buried friends. I had carried wounded soldiers. I had missed birthdays, Christmas mornings, funerals, anniversaries, and countless ordinary moments most people take for granted. But if you asked my parents who had accomplished more in life, they would have pointed to my older brother without hesitation. Ethan Carter, 3 years older than me. The golden child. The favorite. The son. Growing up, Ethan could do no wrong. If he got a C in school, my parents said the teacher was unfair. If I got an A, they asked why it wasn't an A+. When Ethan crashed Dad's truck at 17, Dad blamed the weather. When I earned a military scholarship, Mom asked why I couldn't choose something safer and more feminine. Some things never change, even when you're 45 years old. Even when you're a colonel in the United States Army. Especially when your family refuses to see you. The strange thing was that I never hid my career. I wasn't living a secret life. My rank wasn't classified. My deployments weren't classified. My achievements weren't classified. My family simply never cared enough to listen. Whenever I visited during holidays, conversations revolved around Ethan. Ethan's business. Ethan's investments. Ethan's new boat. Ethan's latest financial problems. Ethan's plans. Ethan's opinions. I became background noise. The daughter who happened to wear a uniform. Nothing more. The only person who truly cared was my grandfather, William Carter, a retired Army officer, a Korean War veteran. A man whose handshake still felt stronger than most men's half his age. Grandpa understood service. He understood sacrifice. Most importantly, he understood silence. He never asked me to tell war stories. He knew some things stayed with soldiers forever. Instead, we'd sit on his porch, drinking coffee and talking about ordinary things. Weather, baseball, history, leadership, duty. The last conversation I ever had with him happened 3 months before he died. He was 92. His health was failing, but his mind remained sharp. "People reveal themselves when money gets involved," he told me. I laughed. "That's a pretty cynical view." "No," he said quietly, "it's experience." Then he pointed toward a wooden display case hanging on his wall. Inside were military medals collected over generations. Some belonged to him. Some belonged to his father. A few dated back almost a century. "Those aren't valuable because of the medal," he said. "They're valuable because of what people gave up to earn them." I never forgot those words. Neither did he. When Grandpa passed away 6 months later, the entire family gathered for the funeral. The service was beautiful. Military honors. A folded flag. The sound of taps drifting across the cemetery. Even now I can't hear that melody without feeling something tighten inside my chest. Afterward came the reading of the will. That's when everything started. The attorney distributed copies. Most assets were divided equally. Nothing surprising. Then he reached the final section. Grandpa's military collection. His medals. His documents. His journals. The display case. Everything. Left to me. The room instantly changed. I noticed Ethan sit forward. What he said. The attorney repeated it. Ethan laughed. "You've got to be kidding." Nobody laughed with him. The attorney simply continued reading. Grandpa had included a handwritten statement. It explained his decision. "Rebecca understands the meaning behind these items. She will preserve them. She will know their worth." I remember looking down at the paper. For a moment I couldn't speak, not because of the inheritance, because I suddenly missed him, more than I had even at the funeral. Across the table, Ethan looked furious. "You manipulated him." I blinked. "What? You talked him into this?" "I did no such thing." Mom immediately joined him. This doesn't seem fair. Dad nodded. Your brother should have received some of that collection. The attorney interrupted. Mr. Carter made his decision very clear. But nobody listened. The drive home was awkward. The weeks afterward became worse. Phone calls stopped. Family gatherings became tense. Comments grew sharper. More personal. More hostile. Then one Saturday morning everything escalated. I drove to Grandpa's house to collect the collection. The executor had finally completed the paperwork. The front door was unlocked. That felt strange. I entered. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Then I walked into the study and froze. The display case was gone. The wall where it had hung stood empty. For several seconds I couldn't process what I was seeing. My heartbeat accelerated. I searched every room. Nothing. No medals. No journals. No documents. Gone. I immediately called the executor. He hadn't authorized anyone to remove anything. I called the police. Then I called Ethan. He answered on the second ring. What? The collection is missing. Silence. Then a chuckle. You mean those old trinkets? My stomach tightened. Ethan, what? Did you take them? Another pause. Then he laughed. Longer this time. Relax. Did you take them? They aren't worth anything anyway. My grip tightened around the phone. Where are they? Maybe you should stop pretending you're some kind of hero. Ethan, maybe Grandpa finally realized he made a mistake. The line went dead. And standing alone inside my grandfather's empty study, staring at the bare wall where generations of military history had once hung, I realized something. This wasn't about medals. This wasn't about inheritance. This was about something much older, something that had been building for decades. For the first time in his life, Ethan had not gotten what he wanted, and he wasn't going to let that stand. The first mistake Ethan made was thinking I would react like the little sister he remembered. He expected tears, anger, a frantic phone call to our parents. Maybe a dramatic scene in the driveway where he could stand there with his arms folded while Mom told me to calm down, and Dad reminded me that family shouldn't fight over old junk. That version of me had existed once. She was 13 sitting at the dinner table while Ethan blamed her for a broken lamp. She was 17 watching her parents attend Ethan's baseball banquet while missing her scholarship ceremony. She was 22 standing in uniform at the airport with nobody there to say goodbye. But that girl was gone. I had spent too many years learning how to think under pressure. I knew better than to move emotionally when someone wanted me emotional. So I stood in Grandpa's study, took one slow breath, and started documenting everything. I photographed the empty wall, the scratches where the display case had been lifted off its brackets, the dust pattern on the floor, the slightly open drawer in Grandpa's desk, the back door with a fresh scuff near the lock. Then I called the police again and made a formal report. The officer who arrived was polite but tired. His name tag read Alvarez. He looked around the study, took notes, and asked the question everyone eventually asks when family is involved. Are you sure this wasn't a misunderstanding? I looked at him evenly. No, officer, this was theft. He studied my face, maybe expecting me to soften the word. I didn't. By Monday morning, I had contacted the estate attorney, the county clerk, Grandpa's insurance carrier, and a retired military archivist I knew through the Pentagon. I gave facts, not emotion. Dates, names, inventory numbers, photographs, copies of Grandpa's will. The original list of items inside the display case. That list mattered. Grandpa had been meticulous. Every metal document, ribbon letter, and journal had been cataloged by date and owner. He hadn't done it because he was worried about money. He had done it because history disappears when careless people treat it like clutter. By Wednesday, I learned that Ethan had visited 3 antique dealers. By Friday, I had names. The first dealer refused him immediately. The second told him the items needed provenance. The third became suspicious when Ethan tried to sell a Purple Heart medal and claimed it belonged to some distant relative nobody cared about. The dealer took a picture of him. That picture reached me through a friend of a friend before the police even had it. There was Ethan standing at a glass counter in his expensive jacket holding my grandfather's medals like they were loose change. For a moment I just stared at the photo. Not because I was surprised. Because I wasn't. That hurt more than surprise would have. When I called my parents that evening, Mom answered with her church voice. That soft, controlled tone she used when she had already decided I was the problem. Rebecca, I hope you're not calling to start trouble. I glanced at the photo on my laptop screen. Ethan stole Grandpa's military collection, she sighed. Your brother said you were overreacting. Did he also mention he tried to sell it? A pause. Then Dad's voice came on the line. Be careful what you accuse your brother of. I have proof. You always think you have proof. That sentence landed with a familiar weight. I closed my eyes briefly. Dad, this isn't a family argument, it's a police matter. No, he snapped. This is you humiliating your brother because Grandpa gave you something you didn't deserve. I opened my eyes. There it was. The real truth. Not hidden anymore. Not dressed up as fairness. You think I didn't deserve it? You weren't close to him like Ethan was. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in me. Ethan visited him twice last year. He has responsibilities. I called Grandpa every week. You always did things for attention. The room went very still around me. I heard the refrigerator hum in my kitchen. The traffic outside my apartment window. My own breathing slow and measured. Dad, I said quietly, I have served this country for 23 years. I don't need to steal attention from anyone. He made a small dismissive sound. There it is. The uniform again. I looked down at my hand. At the small scar across my knuckle from a convoy door in Kandahar. At the faint line near my wrist from shrapnel glass nobody in my family had ever asked about. The uniform, I said, is not a costume. Nobody answered. Then Mom said softer but colder. Maybe if you had spent less time chasing rank you'd understand what family means. I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. 2 weeks later, Ethan changed tactics. If he couldn't quietly sell the medals, he would destroy their meaning. It began with whispers. A cousin called me to ask if it was true I had exaggerated my military record. An aunt sent a message saying she hoped I would seek help because pretending to be decorated was unhealthy. Someone forwarded me a post Ethan had written online. He didn't use my name, but everyone knew. Some people buy uniforms. Some people buy medals. Some people fool old men into thinking they're heroes. Truth always comes out. Underneath it, relatives commented with little praying hands and sad faces. I sat in my office at the Pentagon and read every word without moving. Around me, people walked with badges clipped to their jackets, folders tucked under their arms, phones ringing, coffee cups steaming in tired hands. Real work was happening. Real decisions. Real consequences. And my brother was online telling people I bought my career. That evening I drove home late through steady rain. The windshield wipers dragged back and forth, blurring the red lights ahead of me. I remembered Grandpa's porch, his voice, the way he had looked at me the day I was promoted to colonel, not proud in the loud way, but quietly, deeply proud. You outranked us all, he had whispered. Then he had saluted me. Not as a joke, not as family theater, as one soldier to another. That memory kept me steady. The lawsuit arrived 3 days later. Ethan had hired an attorney and filed a petition challenging the inheritance. He alleged undue influence, fraud, emotional manipulation, and false representation of military status. He requested that Grandpa's military collection be declared improperly assigned and transferred to him as the rightful family heir. There was more. He claimed the medals were counterfeit. He claimed I had planted fake records. He claimed Grandpa had been confused. I read the filing twice. Then I set it on my desk. For the first time since this began, I felt something cold settle inside me. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Clarity. Ethan hadn't just stolen from me. He had insulted Grandpa. He had mocked every man in our family who had served. And he had lied under oath before even entering the courtroom. My attorney, Mary Ann Wells, was calm when I called her. Rebecca, she said, this is uglier than I expected. I know. We can fight it traditionally. No, I said. He wants a performance. Let him have one. She went quiet. I looked at the sealed packet already prepared by Military Records Division, certified and documented in a way even Ethan's attorney could not twist. Then I said the words that would later confuse everyone in that courtroom. On the day of the hearing, I want you to be late. Mary Ann did not answer immediately. Then she asked, how late? Late enough for him to think he's already won. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early October. The weather outside the courthouse was cool and gray, one of those autumn mornings when the sky seemed made entirely of steel. I arrived 40 minutes early. Old habits. Military habits. If something started at 9, you arrived at 8:20. My attorney had argued that we didn't need to come so early. I came anyway. The courthouse stood in the center of town, surrounded by oak trees already losing their leaves. As I climbed the steps, I saw familiar faces gathering near the entrance. Relatives, family friends. People who hadn't called me in years. People who suddenly found time to attend when they thought they might witness a public humiliation. A few looked away when they saw me. Others stared openly. I recognized my cousin Janet standing beside her husband. Janet had once told me she admired my military career. 2 months earlier, she had shared Ethan's post about fake medals. Now she offered an awkward smile. I nodded politely and continued inside. The courtroom was already filling when I entered. The sound reminded me of a church before a funeral service. Whispers, shuffling feet, low conversations, people pretending not to gossip while gossiping anyway. At the front sat Ethan, confident, relaxed, almost cheerful. His attorney Charles Benton was known throughout the county as a skilled litigator. Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive confidence. The kind of lawyer who enjoyed winning in public. Ethan looked up and spotted me. A grin immediately spread across his face. Well, he said loudly enough for nearby people to hear she actually showed up. Several people laughed. I didn't respond. Years earlier that silence would have bothered me. Now it felt natural. You learn something after enough deployments. Not every challenge deserves an immediate response. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is wait. I sat at the defense table, alone. A few minutes passed. Then a few more. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Proceedings began. And Marianne Wells was nowhere in sight. I heard the first whispers almost immediately. Where's her lawyer? Maybe she fired her. Maybe the attorney quit. Maybe the case is hopeless. Ethan looked delighted. His lawyer looked even happier. 5 minutes later, Judge Harold Whitaker glanced toward my table. Ms. Carter, is your counsel present? Not yet, Your Honor. A faint smile touched Ethan's face. 10 minutes passed. No Marianne. The whispers became louder. People started turning around to look directly at me. One woman near the back actually shook her head. Then Ethan decided to perform. He leaned back in his chair and laughed. Looks like even her lawyer figured out she was lying. The gallery erupted with nervous chuckles. Judge Whitaker immediately struck his gavel. Order. But the damage was done. The atmosphere shifted. The room believed a story now. A simple story. The guilty woman had been abandoned. The innocent brother was finally exposing the truth. Human beings love simple stories. Reality is usually more complicated. Judge Whitaker eventually announced that proceedings would begin. If counsel arrives, we'll address it at that time. Ethan's attorney stood immediately, and the attack began. Charles Benton was good. Very good. He spoke smoothly, confidently. Every sentence carefully structured. Every accusation wrapped in professional language. He presented Ethan as a concerned son trying to preserve family history. He portrayed me as a manipulative daughter who had exploited an elderly grandfather. He repeatedly used words like influence, deception, confusion, and fabrication. The strategy was obvious. Repeat a lie enough times and people start treating it like a possibility, then like a probability, eventually like a fact. Several relatives nodded along. My parents certainly did. Dad sat upright with his arms crossed. Mom wore the expression she always wore when Ethan was speaking. Pride. Absolute certainty. The first witness was a family friend named Leonard Briggs. I had known Leonard since childhood. He testified that Grandpa had become forgetful during his final years. Sometimes he repeated stories, Leonard said. Did he seem vulnerable to manipulation? Benton asked. I'd say yes. I watched Leonard carefully. Not angry. Just disappointed. Grandpa had occasionally forgotten names. Occasionally misplaced glasses. He had not forgotten who he was. He had not forgotten who I was. The next witness claimed Grandpa was confused about his finances. Another claimed I often talked about military accomplishments, as if discussing my own life somehow proved fraud. Each testimony pushed the same narrative. Rebecca wanted attention. Rebecca wanted recognition. Rebecca wanted medals she didn't earn. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. Most of these people had never once asked what I actually did in the army. Not once. The third witness introduced himself as an antique collectibles specialist. That caught my attention. He carried photographs of Grandpa's medals. Enlarged prints displayed on boards. The courtroom leaned forward. This was the moment Ethan wanted. The expert pointed at one medal. In my opinion, this is a reproduction. Another. Likely replica. Another. Commercially manufactured. Benton nodded gravely. So you're saying these military decorations are fake? Yes. And in your professional opinion, could someone purchase items like these online? Absolutely. The gallery erupted into whispers. I noticed my mother's smile growing wider. Dad looked vindicated. Ethan looked triumphant. Then the expert delivered the line Ethan had probably rehearsed with him. These items have no significant historical value. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Sadness. Because one of those medals had belonged to my great-grandfather, a man wounded in combat nearly 100 years ago. Another belonged to Grandpa himself, a man who had buried friends whose names most Americans would never know. To hear them reduced to worthless trinkets felt strangely personal. Still, I remained silent. That silence fascinated people. I could see it in their faces. Why wasn't I fighting back? Why wasn't I objecting? Why wasn't I defending myself? Because sometimes silence creates more tension than argument. And because I already knew something nobody else in that room knew. The next witness was worse, a former employee from Ethan's company. He testified that I exaggerated stories, that I loved attention, that I frequently referenced military service. Again, the logic made no sense. Apparently spending 2 decades in the army and occasionally mentioning it was suspicious. Several hours passed. The pile of accusations grew. Fraud, manipulation, counterfeit medals, false prestige, questionable military claims. By lunchtime, Ethan looked almost relaxed, like a man already planning his victory speech. The judge called a short recess. As people stood and stretched, Ethan approached my table. His attorney stayed behind, confident enough not to worry. "Still waiting for your lawyer?" Ethan asked. I looked up calmly. "Yes," he laughed. "You know, this would have been easier if you'd just admitted it." "Admitted what?" "That you've been lying all these years." I studied his face. The arrogance, the certainty, the complete absence of doubt. Then I asked a question. "Do you really believe that?" His smile faded slightly. "Only slightly." "Of course." "Interesting." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." The bailiff announced everyone should return to their seats. Ethan walked away. I glanced toward the courtroom clock. The time was approaching. Not for Marianne. For something else. Proceedings resumed. The final witness stepped down. Benton returned to the center of the courtroom. He delivered a dramatic summary. A polished performance. By the end, he had transformed Ethan into a protector of family legacy, and me into a fraud hiding behind a uniform. Then he sat down. The courtroom became quiet. Judge Whitaker adjusted his glasses and looked toward my table. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then he asked the question everyone had been waiting for. "Ms. Carter," he said, "would you like to present your defense?" Slowly I stood. No attorney beside me. No witnesses waiting outside. No stack of exhibits. Just a black folder resting on the table. Every eye in the room followed me as I picked it up. My parents looked confident. Ethan looked amused. The gallery looked curious. I opened the folder and removed a sealed packet. I held the sealed packet in both hands for a moment before I moved. Not because I was hesitating, because I wanted the room to see it. Heavy white envelope. Federal seal. Certified markings across the front. Chain of custody label along the edge. Not the kind of thing a person prints at home. Not the kind of thing a desperate woman produces at the last second to save herself. The bailiff walked toward me. I handed it over without a word. He brought it to Judge Whitaker, who accepted it with the cautious expression of a man who understood that sealed documents usually arrived with consequences attached. Ethan leaned toward his attorney and whispered something. Charles Benton gave him a brief, reassuring nod, but I noticed his eyes had narrowed. He recognized the envelope, maybe not what was inside, but he knew enough to worry. Judge Whitaker examined the seal. "Ms. Carter, what am I looking at?" "Certified Federal Service records and supporting documentation, Your Honor, submitted with the court's permission." Benton stood instantly. "Objection. We have not reviewed these materials." "You alleged fraud involving military status and counterfeit decorations," I said calmly. "These documents address those allegations directly." Benton turned toward the bench. "Your Honor, this is irregular." Judge Whitaker looked at him over the top of his glasses. "Mr. Benton, your entire case has rested on claims that Ms. Carter fabricated her military background and that the medals at issue are counterfeit. Are you now objecting to authenticated records regarding both?" Benton's jaw tightened. For the first time that day, he did not have a ready answer. The judge broke the seal. The sound was small, barely more than paper tearing, but somehow it filled the entire courtroom. He removed the documents and began reading. At first, his expression remained neutral. That was his job. Judges are trained not to react, not to let a raised eyebrow or a tightened mouth tilt the room. But then he turned the second page, then the third. His hand slowed. Behind me, the gallery had gone silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that feels almost physical. I could hear the old radiator clicking beneath the window. I could hear someone swallow. I could hear my mother shift in the wooden bench behind Ethan. Judge Whitaker read for nearly 3 minutes. No one interrupted him. Not Benton. Not Ethan. Not my parents. Finally, the judge lifted his eyes. They moved first to me, then to Ethan. "Mr. Carter," he said carefully, "do you have any idea who your sister actually is?" Ethan gave a short laugh, but it came out wrong. Too sharp. Too thin. "She's Rebecca," he said. "She's my sister." "That is not what I asked." The courtroom tightened. Ethan looked toward his attorney. Benton didn't move. Judge Whitaker held up the first page. "According to these records, Rebecca Ann Carter is a colonel in the United States Army." A soft gasp moved through the room. Not dramatic. Real. My mother's hand rose halfway to her mouth. My father did not move at all. The judge continued. 23 years of service, multiple overseas deployments, current assignment with the Department of Defense. Her rank, service history, and commendations are authenticated by federal record. Ethan's face twisted. That doesn't prove those medals are real. No, the judge said, but the next section does. He turned another page. Inventory records from the Department of Defense Historical Liaison Office. Photographic verification, serial documentation, estate inventory comparison, supporting statements from 2 certified military historians. Benton finally stood again. Your Honor, may we request a recess to examine? You may sit down, counsel. Benton sat. Slowly. Judge Whitaker's tone had changed. Not louder, not angry, something worse for Ethan. Controlled. Precise. These records indicate that the medals belonging to William Carter and his father were not only authentic, but previously documented as part of a private family military archive. Several items were photographed and cataloged during a veteran's oral history project 8 years ago. I watched Ethan's confident posture drain away inch by inch. His shoulders lowered. His mouth opened slightly. For a second he looked less like my older brother and more like the boy who used to get caught taking money from Mom's purse and still insist it was mine. The judge turned toward the so-called antiques expert. Mr. Halpern, please stand. The man rose awkwardly from the witness bench. His face had gone pale around the mouth. You testified under oath that these medals were reproductions. Yes, Your Honor, based on the photos provided. Provided by whom? He hesitated. The judge waited. No one saved him. Mr. Carter. A rustle moved through the gallery. Judge Whitaker looked toward Ethan. Mr. Carter provided the photographs. Ethan swallowed. My attorney handled. Mr. Carter, the judge said, answer the question. Yes. The judge picked up another sheet. The authenticated records show several distinguishing marks that were not visible in the photographs submitted to Mr. Halpern. Were the items physically examined? Halpern looked down. No, Your Honor. So your testimony that these items had no historical value was based entirely on limited photographs provided by the petitioner? Yes. The judge turned back to Benton. Counsel, did you know your expert had never physically examined the items? Benton's face stiffened. We understood his assessment to be preliminary, yet it was presented as professional certainty. No answer. My father leaned toward Mom and whispered something. She shook her head slowly, eyes fixed on me as if she were seeing me through glass for the first time. But it was too late for that. I had spent years standing close enough to be seen. They had chosen not to look. Judge Whitaker continued through the documents, each page striking the room harder than the last. A certified copy of my promotion orders, a letter confirming my current rank, a list of my own awards. Then Grandpa's handwritten statement entered into the estate record, where he had described why he wanted the archive preserved by me. Rebecca knows what service costs. She will not treat memory as merchandise. The judge read that sentence aloud. My throat tightened, but I kept my face still. That was the closest I came to breaking. Not when Ethan lied. Not when my parents smiled. But when Grandpa's words filled that courtroom in a voice that wasn't his. Ethan suddenly stood. This doesn't change the will. Judge Whitaker looked at him. It changes the credibility of your petition. She manipulated him. With what evidence? Ethan pointed toward me. Look at her. She sits there acting like she's above everyone. I didn't move. The judge's expression hardened. Mr. Carter, sit down. She planned this, Ethan snapped. She always does this. She always makes people think she's better than us because she wore a uniform. My father closed his eyes. That was when I knew. He finally understood what Ethan had done. Not because he felt remorse. Because he realized Ethan had said the quiet part aloud. Judge Whitaker's voice cut through the room. Mr. Carter, you came into this court claiming your sister lied about her service, fabricated military honors, influenced your grandfather, and possessed counterfeit items. The evidence before me now shows the opposite. It also suggests that certain testimony presented today may have been incomplete, misleading, or knowingly false. Ethan sat down. This time no one laughed. No one whispered. No one looked proud. Then the rear courtroom door opened. Every head turned. Mary Ann Wells walked in carrying a slim leather briefcase. My attorney. Exactly on time. She approached the defense table and stood beside me. Apologies to the court, Your Honor, she said. I was delayed obtaining the final certified copy from the clerk's office. She placed another document on the table. Benton stared at it. I watched him understand before Ethan did. Mary Ann looked at the judge. Your Honor, we are also prepared to submit documentation regarding attempted sale of estate property by the petitioner before legal transfer, including statements from 3 antique dealers and 1 photograph taken at the time of attempted sale. The courtroom went still again. A different stillness now, not curiosity. Impact. Ethan looked at me. For the first time all day he looked afraid. Not ashamed. Afraid. And maybe that was the saddest part. He still didn't understand what he had destroyed. Only what it might cost him. Fear changes people. You can watch it happen if you know where to look. It appears first in the eyes, then the jaw, then the shoulders. By the end of that afternoon, Ethan Carter looked nothing like the man who had walked into the courtroom smiling. He sat rigidly beside his attorney, staring at the documents spread across the table. The confidence was gone. The performance was over. Now only reality remained. And reality was not on his side. Marianne stood and began presenting the final evidence. Unlike Ethan's attorney, she didn't need dramatic language. Facts were enough. One by one she introduced statements from antique dealers who had encountered Ethan. One dealer described Ethan attempting to sell items from the military collection. Another identified photographs of specific metals. A third confirmed that Ethan became angry when asked for documentation proving ownership. Then came the photograph, the same photograph I had first seen months earlier. Ethan standing at a display counter. My grandfather's medals in his hands. The image appeared on the courtroom monitor. A murmur swept through the gallery. My mother stared at the screen. Dad looked down at his lap. Neither of them spoke. For years they had defended Ethan, explained Ethan, protected Ethan, rescued Ethan. This time there was nothing left to explain. Judge Whitaker studied the photograph. "Mr. Carter," he said, "did you attempt to sell these items?" Ethan looked toward Benton. Benton remained silent. A lawyer can argue law. A lawyer cannot erase a photograph. "Yes," Ethan finally said. The admission landed like a stone. "Why? They belong to my family. They belong to the estate. They should have been mine." The judge leaned back. "Should have been?" Ethan swallowed. "Yes. Because she's never around." I felt several people turn toward me. The judge remained expressionless. "What does that mean?" Ethan's voice grew louder. "She leaves. That's what she does. She leaves for years. Then she comes back and suddenly she's the hero." Nobody interrupted him. Nobody could. 20 years of resentment had finally broken through. She wasn't there for birthdays. I almost laughed at the absurdity. I had missed birthdays because I was deployed. She wasn't there for holidays, because I was serving overseas. She wasn't there when Mom had surgery. The surgery had happened while I was stationed in Afghanistan. I had called every day, sent flowers, arranged care, visited the moment I returned home. None of it mattered. Not to Ethan. Not because he believed his own argument. Because he needed to believe it. The alternative was admitting that Grandpa had seen something in me he never saw in him. And that truth was unbearable. Judge Whitaker listened patiently. Then he asked a simple question. "Did your sister earn her military rank?" The courtroom fell silent. Ethan hesitated. "That's not the point. Yes or no?" Another pause. "Yes." "Did she earn her military decorations?" "Yes." "Did your grandfather voluntarily leave the collection to her?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yes." The judge nodded slowly. "Then what exactly are we doing here?" No answer came. Because there wasn't one. Not a truthful one. The case had never been about inheritance. It had never been about medals. It had never been about fairness. It was about envy. Pure and simple. The kind that grows quietly over decades until it consumes everything around it. Marianne rose once more. "Your Honor, we'd also like to address the allegation that Colonel Carter fabricated her military history." The title echoed through the courtroom. Colonel Carter. Not Rebecca. Not little sister. Not daughter. Not the family disappointment. Colonel. A rank I had earned one difficult year at a time. Marianne submitted additional records. Promotion orders. Evaluations. Awards. Letters of commendation. Nothing classified. Nothing sensational. Just a lifetime of service documented on paper. The judge reviewed them carefully. Then he closed the file. The sound echoed through the room. Decision made. After reviewing the evidence, he said the court finds no basis for the petition challenging the inheritance. Ethan closed his eyes. The court further finds substantial evidence that the military collection is authentic and was properly assigned according to the wishes of William Carter. My mother began quietly crying. Not loudly. Not dramatically. The tears of someone realizing that reality will not bend to preference. Judge Whitaker continued. The petition is dismissed. Just 3 words. Yet they ended months of accusations, months of lies, months of humiliation. But he wasn't finished. The court is also troubled by testimony presented today regarding the authenticity of military artifacts and the allegations made concerning Colonel Carter's service record. The room became very still. Copies of today's proceedings will be referred for further review regarding potential misrepresentation and false statements. Benton closed his briefcase without looking at anyone. He knew exactly what that meant. The hearing was over. People began standing. Chairs scraped across the floor. Conversation started, but something felt different. No one approached Ethan. No one congratulated him. No one offered support. The crowd that had gathered to watch my downfall suddenly found somewhere else to be. Funny how that works. I gathered my papers slowly. Marianne leaned closer. You okay? I considered the question. Honestly, yes. I thought I'd feel better. She nodded. I know. Because victory and healing are not the same thing. Across the room, my parents remained seated. Older somehow. Smaller. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Dad stood and walked toward me. Mom followed. Ethan remained where he was, alone. For the first time in his life, Dad stopped a few feet away. His eyes were red. Not from crying. From shame. Or maybe exhaustion. Rebecca. Just my name. Nothing else. I waited. He looked down briefly, then back at me. When did you become a colonel? The question nearly broke my heart. Not because it was cruel, because it was sincere. He genuinely didn't know. After all these years, all those promotions, all those ceremonies,